Ashwin Sharma, GP from NEOM. We are not there, but what I agree that we won't leave it to the board. What we've done on a prescribing, that we share 30% of overspend and we bail them out. But beyond that, we have a support system where there is a basic support, then a need-based support, and then we target the support, the practices who are overspending. As regard the other way for the commissioning, from police system to network, we now have a group, we call them commissioning and shared service partners. Until that any regulations are there, we are thinking of having an agreement like KPI. So if long-term care for diabetes, we provide the KPI for engagement for each practice what they have to do. So that may be the way forward, and when the regulation is there, we can apply it.
Adam Weston from Redbridge. It's really interesting to see it. We're all at different phases of development. We're a borough-wide consortium in principle with sign-up for 48 out of 50 practices. And I find that as clinical leaders, what we're struggling with at the moment is a strained relationship with the PCT beginning to develop in the sense that they are organising themselves into a reformed PCT with the same players positioning themselves in a new commissioning support unit. And I just want to understand from anybody how we deal with that strain.
It's a really difficult time. I have a lot of good friends in PCTs who are really good people, and it's a really difficult time for them. They've been told that in 2 years' time they're dead, and it's a really difficult time for them.
Firstly, I'd just like to endorse what you said. There are some great people in PCTs out there, and engaging them in the first instance will really help you, I think. On governance generally, you've got to have your consortium constitution. You all know that. It will be iterative. Don't feel that it's a failure if you have to change it as you go along. Learn from one another, and as we gain more experience around the country, we'll bring that learning to you.
It's just that this part about the BSU is really crucial, because I think it's part of the governance. And I think we've just had a discussion today about this. And one of the issues is to just make sure that the accountability of the BSU director isn't a dotted line to the commissioning board. It is actually a proper line, and it's incremental with delegated authority. And that needs to be a discussion with cluster sector, whatever you want to call it. But I do think that we, to make the best of what we have now, and I understand there's a lot of good people and it's a difficult time, we just need proper accountability in governance, well prescribed in the system. So,
looking at the governance model, the structure that is suggested, how do you feel? Do you feel strongly that the consortium board should have non-executive directors?
Not particularly. It is a model that you can use. The most critical thing is that you've got that clinical engagement, and I think that should come from within the GP group. Non-executives bring advantages with them, but you can do without them. You don't critically need them. And as I said before, it was just a suggested model. It's not a blueprint for you all to follow.
So if you don't have non-execs bringing a slightly remote degree
External
of challenge, how do you bring challenge in?
Yeah.
What's your view on that?
Well, I think you will get that challenge from your GP members if you engage them effectively enough.
I think our experience has been that yes, the GPs do provide their own challenges, believe me, because I do this a bit all day every day, and they're good challenges, and that's what's helping drive the thing forward first and foremost. Secondarily, as we've evolved, we've brought onto our board key people from the PCT when they were still the PCT, okay? And secondly, we've brought people from the Borough Council onto the PCT, and we've started engaging with, but haven't yet actually brought in, but we're going to bring in some people from the voluntary sector and the third sector. So you get a completely rounder picture of that which you're looking at, and instead of looking at it through a very narrow focus, GPs find that they get a different perspective on that which they're looking at, and it broadens not just their exposure to it, but the decision-making process is sometimes made harder, but it's a better decision as a result of all that extra input.
But you've also got the accountability of the health and wellbeing boards as well. The health and wellbeing boards, the local health watch, so you've got you've got all those challenges
Yeah.
locally, so it's not just at the consortium board level.
Did you cover relationships with other organisations in the governance conversation tonight?
Yes, talking about how you must be outward facing and take those relationships into account. And also how your consortium constitution is a bit of an advert for how you're operating, so you're giving assurance by having a strong constitution as well, I think, to those organisations.
Simon Reed from Brent. I was just wondering if anyone has any experience of having patient participation on the board, something we've been thinking about.
I should have said that. Sorry, we've got one. I should have said that. It's very good experience. Very great.
There'll be more and more of that. The Secretary of State, nothing about you without you,
Yeah.
phrase. The patient power here will be much stronger than people I think have realised in the next 3, 4, 5 years. And when you're a publicly accountable body, it'll be a different set of questions coming from the public as well. So it's that thinking about that now is a smart move.
In 2 years' time, we'll have to have open meetings so that the public actually have a role both to observe and to intervene. I think the real problem with the representation of the public on the board is how do you select the people who are going to do that? And I think that's what we're all struggling with. It's not that we don't want them there, but how do we choose them?
I think those people absolutely have to have the right skills, don't they? So you have to look for a skill mix. They have to bring something other than just their experience, possibly as a patient. But if you think about one of the criteria that the success of the consortia is going to be measured by is managing long-term conditions. So that is something that patient representation at board level can really help with.
But the danger of that is you get people with a specific condition who are grinding an axe.
Divert everything. Yeah.
Yeah. So you need to accept, I suspect, you know the answer to this already, Simon, that you'll never ever find the perfect candidate in a sense. So maybe you need to think of ways of refreshing it, getting different opinions in, etc. And because someone will always have, as you say, an axe to grind, even if it's done very quietly and politely. You just need to find different ways of getting into engagement rather than through 1 or 2 people.
Absolutely. This is just brainstorming because we haven't got the solution yet. But I reckon that there's two things. There's one at board level, and that actually isn't about a patient group or a patient expert. I think patient groups, experts, and what have you, come on the redesign area, which is more towards what you described as cabinet was. I'm not sure about the terminology. And actually, on the board, I'm quite sure that we need to think about Health Watch as probably a source of where we get our...
Yeah.
Other things that people want to raise, other questions for Gail, are things that she said that you agree or don't agree with. Jeff from Brent, looks like you're about to say something.
Well, no, I'm not sure if it's relevant for this, but I was wanting a bit more, or your opinion on the any willing provider situation, and we just had a bit of sort of thoughts around the governance issues around that when we're commissioning services.
Shall I defer that to a colleague in the room? Bruce?
Yeah, I mean, where my experience is looking at the any willing provider from the elective area, where we've been learning those lessons. I think the emerging lessons for it are, and it's coming out very clearly in the current iteration of any willing provider, is the challenge between local accreditation and acceptance of national standards is one of the big challenges. What role will CQC play in accreditation? And is there, if there is CQC accreditation of a service, is that a sufficient quality standard for you to include them in your accreditation? So there's a quality challenge there, and there's a proportionality about what you're doing. The second challenge that's coming along, though, in AWP is actually, and it's particularly going to be the case as there's a commitment to extend AWP into community services, is where do you find the price that is not, and how do you bundle the service into service that is deliverable and actually capable of being priced in the right bundles. And I think that is, in the medium term, is going to be as big a challenge as anything else, because we don't have the currencies outside tariff in many cases, and that's going to be the biggest challenge towards creating AWP. So you've got those two challenges. I think the third challenge you're going to have is actually stimulating and actually engaging with the providers and creating AWP services that are affordable for a new provider to come into, but are immediately deliverable by some existing providers. And the only way you're going to do that, learning from experiences around the country, is an accreditation process that recognises there will probably be an initial group of people who are accredited to provide, but there is clear signalling that there will be other windows opening for other accreditations over the next year, 18 months, 2 years, and there is working with those providers to say, you weren't accredited this time because of these elements in your work. It's not just you didn't do it, but actually there's a positive urge to encourage people to be accredited, which gives you the critical mass of providers. Once you've done that, you've done all you need to do for those providers, but it is going the extra mile, and it's non-competitive in that sense. It's encouraging a critical mass of providers. And I think those three things together will create effective AWP markets, and they will be able to deliver some of those challenges. But the middle one I mentioned, namely price, is a very considerable one. It's a good example where you need to work together, I think, to look at those areas. And I know not just Big Pharma, but other people are working together to create some of those pricing structures for those AWPs.